Chapter 2. Open the Door. The first thing Astarion knew after death was dirt. Not darkness, not hunger, not even pain, though pain was there, vast and patient and waiting for him like an old creditor. Dirt came first. It filled his mouth, packed beneath his nails, pressed against his eyelids, his ears, his throat. It sat on his chest with the weight of the whole uncaring world and did not move when he tried to breathe. He could not breathe. He did not need to breathe. He did not know that yet, so he tried. His body convulsed around the absence. His lungs clawed for air that would not come, and panic tore through him so violently that for one merciful instant he forgot everything else. He forgot the alley, the blood, the cold mouth at his throat, the elegant man bending over him like a blessing turned inside out. He forgot his own name, then his hand struck wood. A coffin. No. The thought came slowly, stupidly, as though his mind were limping toward it. No, no, no. He shoved upward. Nothing moved. He screamed and dirt poured into his mouth. That was when memory returned. His mother's voice. Oh, my little star. Astarion went still, not calm, never calm. Still in the way small hunted things go still when they understand the trap is already closed. His mother had seen him dead. His mother had touched his face. His mother had buried him. He tried to say her name, but he had not called her anything but mother in years, because affection had always embarrassed him when it stood too close to need. The childish names were gone, packed away with fever dreams, stolen bread, and the small rented rooms where she mended his sleeves by candlelight. He had not said goodbye. He had been too busy dying. Something in him broke then. Not the large, dramatic breaking he would learn later, the kind that came with screams and blood and Cazador's soft applause. This was quieter, a hairline fracture running through the last warm place in him. He clawed at the coffin lid. At first, nothing happened. Then wood splintered beneath his fingers. Astarion froze. His nails had gone through the plank. He stared, though there was nothing to see but blackness and dirt and the red after-image of panic behind his eyes. Then hunger moved inside him. It was not like hunger had been when he was alive. He knew hunger. He had grown up with it. Mortal hunger had edges. It gnawed, complained, hollowed, sharpened. It could be tricked for a while with water, with sleep, with pride, with theft. This was different. This was not emptiness. This was command. It opened inside him like a second mouth and said, "Feed." Astarion screamed again. This time he clawed upward like an animal. Wood cracked. Dirt collapsed. His fingers tore through packed earth, impossibly strong and still not strong enough. He kicked. He thrashed. He broke the coffin lid into jagged pieces and dragged himself into the grave soil inch by inch, swallowing mud, coughing though he had no breath, sobbing though no tears came. At last, one hand broke the surface. Rain touched his fingers. Cold. Real. He dug harder. The grave gave birth to him badly. He emerged on his stomach in the wet earth, filthy and gasping out of habit, his burial clothes torn, his hair matted with mud and blood gone black. The cemetery crouched around him beneath a moonless sky. Headstones leaned like listeners. Beyond the iron fence, Baldur's Gate burned with distant lamps, golden and unreachable. For a moment, he thought he was alone. Then applause came from beneath the cypress trees. Slow, delicate, mocking. Astarion lifted his head. Cazador Szarr stood at the edge of the grave. He wore dark velvet, not mourning black exactly, something richer. Something that drank the night and returned nothing. Well done, Cazador said. Astarion tried to speak. What came out was a snarl. It startled him. Cazador smiled. Oh, listen to that. Not so polished now. Astarion pushed himself up on shaking arms. What did you do to me? His voice sounded wrong, hoarse, raw, too thin around the edges. I saved you. No. Yes. No, Astarion said again, because it was the only word large enough for the horror and still much too small. No, I died. You were dying. I died. Cazador stepped closer. And now you are returned. Astarion scrambled backward, slipped in the mud, and hit the side of the grave. His body moved strangely, too fast when he meant to be still, too strong when he meant only to brace himself. Every sound came sharpened, rain on stone, worms moving in the earth, the faint pulse of something alive in the trees. A rat. His head snapped toward it. Hunger surged. No. He clapped a hand over his mouth. Cazador laughed softly. There it is. Astarion shook his head. What am I? Mine. The word entered him before he understood it. Not metaphorically, not poetically. It sank. Astarion felt it like a hook behind the breastbone. His body, which had crawled from a grave, which had broken wood and moved earth and survived the impossible, stopped obeying him. Cazador held out one pale hand. Come here. Astarion did not move. He would remember that later as his first victory. A little one. A pathetic one. 3 seconds of disobedience in a cemetery. But for 3 seconds he did not move. Cazador's expression did not change. Come here, boy. Pain struck, not from outside, from within. Every nerve lit at once, a white fire threaded through bone. Astarion collapsed into the mud, mouth open, unable even to scream properly. Cazador waited. When the pain stopped, the world returned in pieces. Rain. Mud. Hunger. Cazador's shoes inches from his face. Come here, Cazador said again. Astarion crawled. He hated himself before he had even learned the shape of his new body. Cazador crouched before him and touched 2 fingers beneath his chin, lifting his face as if inspecting bruised fruit. Such a mess. Astarion spat at him. Or tried. His mouth was too dry. Cazador sighed. That defiance will become tedious if you insist on making it ugly. Go to hell. Enter. Astarion held the wood until splinters drove under his nails. No. Then pain answered for him. This time, Cazador let it last longer. Astarion fell across the threshold. The doors closed behind him. That was his second lesson. The first had been obedience. The second was that there would always be witnesses, and none of them would help. They stripped him in a room lined with mirrors. Astarion fought. Of course he fought. He fought with every filthy trick he had learned in alleys before law taught him better methods of violence. He bit, he kicked. He drove his elbow into the throat of a spawn whose name he did not know and nearly laughed when the creature staggered. Eventually, perhaps, but not tonight. Astarion's teeth ached. His gums throbbed. He ran his tongue across them and cut himself on a fang. He went still. Cazador watched the realization bloom. Yes, he said, careful, those are new. Astarion jerked away. What did you make me? Cazador's smile was almost gentle. A useful tool. The palace was marble and shadow. Astarion would learn its hallways by terror before he learned them by sight. The first time he entered, he was dragged. Not because he could not walk. He could. He had walked from the cemetery to the carriage with Cazador's hand at the back of his neck and the command under his skin. He had sat across from his murderer while mud dried on his burial clothes and hunger screamed so loudly he could barely understand words. But at the threshold of Szarr Palace, something in him rebelled. Perhaps it was the doors. They were enormous, black wood banded in iron, polished until the torchlight slid across them like oil. They opened inward without a sound. Astarion saw the hall beyond and understood, with an instinct deeper than thought, that if he crossed that threshold, something final would happen. The grave had been temporary. The palace would not be. No, he whispered. Cazador did not look at him. Enter. Astarion's foot moved. He caught the doorframe. His fingers dug into the wood. Splinters drove beneath his nails. No. Cazador turned then. There were servants in the hall, pale figures, standing still as furniture. Beautiful faces, empty eyes, all watching without seeming to watch. Cazador's expression grew mild. Do not embarrass me. Astarion stood his ground as much as he could, wild and breathless. The servants did not react. Cazador stepped closer. Enter. His fingers closed around the doorframe. No, he said. It was not clever. It was not elegant. It was not enough. Cazador turned his head, mildly inconvenienced, as though Astarion had scuffed the floor rather than refused a threshold. Then Cazador said, Be still. And Astarion was still, his body locked so abruptly that he nearly fell. Hands moved over him. They removed the torn burial coat, cut away his shirt where dried blood had stiffened it to his skin, unfastened his boots, took his rings one by one. Cheap silver, pretty lies, little trophies of the man he had made himself into. Those are mine, he said. A spawn with golden hair and a dead expression dropped them into a tray. They were, Cazador said. Astarion turned his head as far as the command allowed. Cazador stood near the mirrors, watching, always watching. I bought those. Yes. With my money. Yes. They belong to me. Cazador smiled. What a charmingly mortal idea. There is no yours anymore. There is only what I allow you to have. Astarion's throat closed. Not with tears. He had not cried. Could not, perhaps. His body had changed too much, and not enough. But something like tears gathered behind his eyes and found nowhere to go. They bathed him. That was what Cazador called it. In truth, they erased him. Warm water darkened with grave dirt, then blood. Hands scrubbed mud from his hair and beneath his nails. Oils were worked into his curls until they shone. His skin, already too pale in life, looked nearly luminous now, bloodless and cold beneath the candlelight. He kept waiting to see bruises. There were none. The beating had vanished from his body. His lip was no longer split. His ribs no longer broken. His throat bore no wound. He looked untouched. That was worse. When they brought him to stand before the largest mirror, Astarion lifted his gaze. The room reflected behind him. Marble floor. Silver basin. Candle flames. But where Astarion should have been, there was nothing. His breath stopped. No. Habit. Only habit. He had no breath to stop. He reached toward the glass. The mirror showed the room behind his hand. No, he said. Cazador came to stand at his back. In the mirror, Astarion saw only empty air where they both should have been. Astarion gasped. He looked for himself and found only the room. Marble, candlelight. Nothing where Astarion Cazador should have been. His hand lifted before he meant it to, fingers hovering near the glass. No face, no body, no proof he existed. The sound he made was small enough that he hated it. It was the smallest possible horror among a banquet of horrors. So naturally, it was the one that broke his voice. Cazador laughed. Not loudly, not cruelly enough for the room to notice, just a little sound of pleasure near Astarion's ear. Oh, little star. Astarion went cold in a way even death had not managed. He turned. Cazador's smile sharpened. What did you call me? That was what she called you, wasn't it? Astarion lunged. He did not decide to do it. Decision would have been too slow. One moment Cazador wore his mother's name in his mouth. The next Astarion had his hands around Cazador's throat. The room erupted. Spawn seized him. One grabbed his hair. Another twisted his arm behind his back until bone cracked. Astarion screamed, then laughed because the sound came out ugly, and he wanted ugly. He wanted blood. He wanted the mirror to shatter and the palace to burn and Cazador's face to change. Cazador did not struggle. He simply looked at Astarion through the mess of hands and fury. Kneel. Astarion hit the marble hard enough to crack it. Cazador adjusted his collar. His throat bore no mark. Again, Cazador said softly, Astarion's body folded lower. Again. His forehead touched the floor. The marble was cold beneath his skin. Better. Astarion shook. Not from fear. Not only fear. From the effort of not begging. Cazador crouched beside him. I know all of you now, he said, the magistrate, the gutter child, the vain little climber, the beloved son. Astarion squeezed his eyes shut. Cazador's fingers slid into his damp hair. Especially the beloved son. Don't. The word escaped before he could stop it. A gift. A weakness. Cazador accepted it with visible satisfaction. Do not worry, he murmured. I will make sure she is remembered. Astarion's nails scraped the marble. Little star. This time Astarion did beg. Not for mercy. Not for freedom. Only hoarsely, pathetically. Please, don't call me that. Cazador smiled. That was the third lesson. Private things were not safe inside him anymore. The palace taught him hunger by withholding. On the first night, they gave him nothing. On the second, nothing. On the third, when the hunger had become a living god in his bones, Cazador brought him to a stone room beneath the palace and placed a crystal goblet on a table. It was filled with blood. Astarion smelled it before he saw it. His body moved toward it. Cazador said, Stop. Astarion stopped so violently he nearly fell. The goblet sat 5 steps away. 5 steps. The blood inside was dark and warm and everything. He could hear it. Not truly, perhaps, but the hunger gave it a voice. It sang in the chamber. It sang through his teeth. Cazador walked to the table and lifted the glass. This, he said, is not for you. Astarion stared. His fangs ached. Please. The word came out before pride could catch it. Cazador looked pleased, though not surprised. There are rules. Astarion swallowed nothing. His throat clicked dryly. Rules. Yes, you will learn them. Cazador tilted the goblet and let one drop fall onto the floor. Astarion's entire body flinched toward it. He stopped himself. Barely. Cazador smiled. You may feed when I permit it. You may drink what I provide. You may not touch thinking creatures unless I command you to. You may not drink from me. You may not leave this palace without permission. You may not refuse an order. You may not die. Astarion let a coarse sound, almost a laugh, escape his lips. It scraped out of him like a broken thing. You have something to say, boy? Cazador growled. Astarion remained quiet, staring intently at the goblet. Cazador poured the goblet slowly onto the stones. Astarion watched blood spread between the cracks. Lick it up, Cazador said. Astarion went still. No. Pain came. Short, sharp. No, Astarion gasped again. The pain came again, longer this time. His knees hit the floor. He folded over himself, fangs bared, fingers curled against the stone. Cazador waited. I will not, Astarion said through clenched teeth. Cazador stepped over the spilled blood and crouched before him. Little star. Astarion trembled. No, lick it up. He found he could no longer resist, and he complied. It tasted like metal, like dirt, like ash, but also made a bit of the tearing hunger cease, if only slightly. That was the fourth lesson. There was no humiliation so complete that hunger could not make it worse. Rats came later. He hated that he was grateful. The first one was tossed into his cell alive. Astarion had been chained to the wall for some offense he no longer remembered. Perhaps speaking. Perhaps silence. Perhaps looking at Cazador with too much hatred and not enough fear. The rat hit the floor and froze. So did he. It was a pathetic thing. Wet fur, black eyes, tiny frantic heartbeat. Astarion heard that heartbeat as clearly as if it lived inside his own skull. "No," he whispered. The rat ran. The chain snapped taut as he lunged. He caught it before he meant to. His hands closed around a warm body. Tiny bones shifted beneath his fingers. The rat shrieked. Astarion sobbed once, furious and starving. Then he fed. It was disgusting. It was glorious. It was not enough. Blood filled his mouth, hot and filthy and thin, and his body sang with relief so intense it felt holy. He drank until there was nothing left, until he was licking fur, until shame returned in the silence after hunger stepped back. He dropped the rat. It hit the floor as a scrap. Astarion stared at it. Then he began to laugh, softly at first. Then harder. Then so hard the chains rattled, and his throat tore around the sound. When Cazador visited an hour later, Astarion was sitting against the wall with blood on his mouth and the dead rat beside his knee. "How was your supper?" Cazador asked. Astarion looked up. The right answer was gratitude. He knew that already. He chose wrong because some part of him still could. "I've had better service." Cazador's smile vanished. The chain tightened. Astarion was dragged forward across the stones. "You will learn," Cazador said. Cazador struck him, and struck him, and struck him. By the end, Astarion had learned something after all. Not silence. Not yet. But the exact amount of mockery that could fit inside a broken mouth. The other spawn did not become family. Astarion would resent anyone who suggested it later. Family was his mother mending his collar before they buried him. Family was inconvenient love in rooms too small for dignity. Family was someone calling you little star because once, before you were sharp and ruined and old enough to hate tenderness, you had been small enough to be held. The spawn were not family. They were warnings wearing faces. Deliria had been a doctor once. Astarion knew this because she still looked at bodies as if they were problems with answers. Not people exactly, not anymore, but systems, wounds, reactions, limits. She watched pain with a scholar's focus and hunger with a physician's detachment, as though vampirism were an illness she had not yet forgiven herself for failing to cure. He did not like Deliria. That would have been too generous a word for anything that could survive in Szarr Palace. But he disliked her less than the others, which in that house was close enough to affection to be dangerous. Petra's was vanity emptied of wit. Leon was silence with teeth. Aurelia had learned to make pity look like boredom. Violet smiled as if she had buried herself years ago and found the grave comfortable. But Deliria watched, calculated, remembered. And sometimes, when Cazador's attention turned elsewhere, she looked at Astarion not with compassion, exactly, but recognition, as though she knew the precise anatomy of what was being broken. They all knew more than he did. That made them dangerous. "You'll last longer if you stop fighting everything," Leon told him once. They were standing in one of the upper halls while Cazador entertained guests beyond a pair of carved doors. Music slipped through the wood. Laughter, mortal laughter, warm and careless. Astarion's throat burned. He had been dressed for display, pale silk at his throat, dark velvet fitted so precisely it felt like another kind of hand. His hair had been brushed until it gleamed. Someone had painted over the faint darkness beneath his eyes, though there was no mirror to confirm it. Beauty was no longer something he chose. It was something done to him. "I adore unsolicited advice," Astarion said. "It pairs so well with imprisonment." Leon's mouth barely moved. "You think you're the first to be clever?" "No, only the best." Petra's lounging near the wall snorted. "He'll beat that out of you." Astarion smiled at him. "And yet he failed with your stupidity. Hope remains." Petra shoved him against the wall. Astarion shoved back. The doors opened. All three froze. Cazador stood there with guests behind him, candlelight spilling around his silhouette. Astarion felt the command before it was spoken. "Stand still." His body obeyed. Cazador's gaze moved from Petras to Leon to Astarion. "Is there a problem?" "No, master," Leon said. Petras lowered his eyes. "No, master." Astarion's jaw locked. The silence stretched. Cazador stepped closer. Astarion? The name sounded almost intimate in his mouth. Astarion smiled. He had worn smiles before as jewelry, as invitation, as escape. This one came with a hook buried in it. No, master. Cazador's eyes warmed. Good. He turned back to his guests. This is the newest. The newest. Not magistrate, not Ancunin, not even Spawn. The newest. One guest, a woman with jewels at her throat and a pulse Astarion could hear from across the room, tilted her head. He is beautiful. Astarion looked at her. For one bright, awful second, hunger and anger braided together until he could not tell them apart. Yes, Cazador said. He was very proud of that. The guests laughed. Astarion did not move. Silk at his throat. Marble under his feet. Cazador behind him. That was another lesson. Beauty in Cazador's house was not a gift. It was a prayer one was forced to kneel inside. The first time Cazador sent him out, Astarion thought it meant he had won something. He was a fool. A starving, half-mad, beautifully dressed fool standing in the entry hall while a servant adjusted his cuffs. Cazador circled him slowly. Smile? Astarion smiled. Not like that. Astarion's mouth twitched. Cazador struck him lightly across the face. Not enough to bruise. Never where it would show. Again. Astarion smiled. Better, softer, make them think they are safe. Are they? Cazador paused behind him. Astarion felt him there without turning. He had learned that too, how not to flinch when Cazador stood behind him. Or rather, how to flinch inwardly, where no one could see and punish it. That depends on you. The words slid coldly between his ribs. Astarion stared at the doors. Who? Anyone suitable? Suitable for what? Cazador placed a hand at the back of his neck. Astarion went still. For dinner. The hall tilted. No. The hand tightened. Astarion. No. You will go into the city. You will find someone lovely or lonely or foolish. You will bring them here. You will make them cross my threshold willingly. No. Pain. He did not fall this time. He was proud of that for several seconds, until Cazador increased it and pride became impossible to hold. When he could hear again, Cazador was speaking. You will not feed on them. You will not warn them. You will not fail me. Astarion's hands shook. What will you do to them? Cazador smiled. What I did to you if they are fortunate. Astarion almost vomited. His body did not allow it. Cazador leaned close. Say it. Astarion closed his eyes. No. Say it. The command entered his bones. I will bring someone. Again. I will bring someone. To whom? Astarion's mouth would not open. Cazador waited. To you, he whispered. Good boy. Astarion's eyes snapped open. The rage that flooded him was so pure it almost felt alive. Cazador saw it and smiled. Go on, little star, shine. The city had not waited for him. That offended him more than it should have. Baldur's Gate roared on exactly as before. Carts clattered, rain shone on cobbles, drunks spilled from taverns, lovers argued beneath awnings. Children darted through market crowds with quick hands and quicker feet. His city. No, not his. Not anymore. Astarion stood under a golden street lamp in a coat Cazador had chosen and felt more dead than he had in the grave. No one knew him. That was not entirely true. A few faces turned. One man stared too long, frowning as if trying to place a melody he had not heard in years. A woman in a shawl paused with her basket on her arm, eyes widening. Astarion turned away before recognition could finish forming. He had been buried. Let him stay buried. The hunger moved in him constantly, but Cazador's command sat above it. Bring someone. Not feed. Bring. He tried to choose someone monstrous. That was his first strategy. A cruel man, a violent man, someone who deserved the palace, someone whose disappearance would lighten the world. He found a dock brute cornering a girl behind a tavern and thought, him. He stepped into the alley, smiling. Darling, he said, surely if you're going to be vile, you could at least be imaginative. The brute turned. The girl ran. Good. The brute swung. Astarion broke his wrist. That was when everything went wrong. Fear filled the man. Hot, living fear. His pulse thundered. Blood rushed beneath his skin. Astarion smelled it, heard it, wanted it. He lunged. The command stopped him inches from the man's throat. Do not feed. Astarion made a sound like a wounded dog. The brute fled. Astarion staggered back against the wall, shaking. He could not even choose his own monster. He could not even be useful in damnation. He returned to the palace alone. Cazador was waiting. The kennel was beneath the wine cellar. At least, that was what Astarion called it in his head. Cazador called it the reflection vault. There were no mirrors, only stone. A room barely tall enough to stand in, with an iron door and a drain in the floor. Godi dragged him there after the beating. Astarion had stopped speaking by then, not because he had learned obedience, but because words had become too expensive and he had nothing left to buy them with. Cazador followed. You were given a simple task. Astarion spat blood onto the floor. Godi struck him across the back with something hooked. Astarion screamed. Cazador sighed. You see, this is what your pride earns you. Astarion laughed, or tried to. A private room? You shouldn't have. Cazador nodded to Godi. The next blow opened his back. This is not punishment, Cazador said. Punishment implies I expected better. This is instruction. Astarion pressed his forehead to the stone. Then you're a poor teacher. Another blow. He lost count after 6, or 10, or 20. Time behaved strangely in the vault. When Godi finished, Cazador crouched beside him. Astarion lay curled on the floor, shirt shredded, back wet with blood that did not nourish him. His own blood did nothing. That seemed petty. You may leave, Cazador said, when you understand. Astarion opened one eye. Understand what? Cazador brushed a curl from his face with revolting tenderness. That your body is not yours to preserve. The door closed. Darkness followed. The vault taught him how to disappear. Not physically. Physically, he was trapped in the shape Cazador desired. Beautiful, pale, hungry, unaging, woundless when wounds were inconvenient, breakable when pain was required. But inside, Astarion found corners. At first, he filled them with rage. Rage kept him company for a while. It was warm. It remembered his name. It told him that when the door opened, he would tear Cazador's throat out, drink him dry, burn the palace, find his mother, explain. No. Not that. Never that. His mother had buried him. His mother visited a grave that no longer held him. He could not go to her. Not like this. The rage became grief. Grief was worse company. So he made jokes to himself in the dark. Very well, Astarion. This is unpleasant, but the acoustics are good. He laughed once. It frightened him. After hunger sharpened too much, jokes stopped working. He counted stones. He named rats he could hear beyond the walls. He recited court procedure. He tried to remember Ilvara's laugh. He tried to remember his mother's hands. Cazador had called him Little Star, and now even that memory had teeth. Eventually he discovered that he could go somewhere very far away without moving. He could leave his body behind in the vault, curled around hunger and pain, and retreat into a high, cold place inside himself where nothing touched him, because there was nothing there to touch. He survived by disappearing first. When the door opened, he did not lift his head. Cazador stood over him. "Are you ready to be useful?" Astarion stared at the drain. "Yes, master." The words came out softly. Cazador listened, then smiled, because they sounded true. The charming boy came 3 nights later. He was not a boy, not truly. Younger than Astarion had been when he died, perhaps, or maybe merely young in the way the hopeful always looked young to the damned. Human, brown-eyed, nervous hands, good coat, badly chosen. Scholar, maybe. Clerk, maybe. Someone who had dressed with care and then spent the evening fearing it was too much. Astarion saw him in a tavern near the Wide, saw him before the boy saw Astarion. That was the first cruelty. Seeing had once been his gift. Now it was his trade. The boy sat alone with a book open beside his cup, though he had not turned a page in some time. He glanced toward the door whenever it opened, waiting for someone, or hoping someone would arrive. There was loneliness in the set of his shoulders and a stubborn little ember of dignity beneath it. Astarion knew him immediately. Not his name. His shape. The kind of person who wanted to be chosen and was ashamed of wanting it. Perfect. Astarion nearly left. The command tightened. "Bring someone." He crossed the room. Every step was theatre. He let his coat move, let the candlelight catch his hair, let his smile arrive before he did, warm enough to make the boy sit straighter. "Is this seat taken?" Astarion asked, "or are you saving it for someone more interesting?" The boy blinked up at him. A blush climbed his throat. "Oh, no. Yes, no one is sitting there." A tragedy corrected. Astarion sat. The boy fumbled with his book. "I'm Sebastian." There. A name. Names made things harder. Astarion smiled. Astarion. He waited for recognition. There was none. Of course there was none. Magistrate Ancunin was dead. This creature wore his face. Sebastian smiled shyly. "That's a beautiful name." Astarion almost stood. Instead, he leaned closer. "I've always thought so." Sebastian laughed. It was easy after that. Horribly easy. Sebastian liked books, but apologized for speaking about them too long. He had come to the city 6 months ago. He worked as a bookkeeper for a shipping firm and hated it. He wanted to study law, perhaps, or history, or something that mattered, though he said this as if expecting Astarion to mock him. Astarion did not. He listened. That was the worst of it. He listened because Cazador had taught him to make them believe they were chosen. But he also listened because once, not long ago and a lifetime ago, he had believed wanting more was not a crime. Sebastian asked, "What do you do?" Astarion's smile did not falter. "Oh, a little of this, a little of that." "That sounds mysterious." "It sounds better than unemployed." Sebastian laughed again. Astarion's fingers rested near his cup. Not touching him. Not yet. Never too soon. That was old knowledge, now sharpened for a crueler purpose. "You're very practiced at this," Sebastian said quietly. Astarion tilted his head. "At what?" "Making people feel like they're the only person in the room." For a moment, Astarion forgot the next line. The tavern noise swelled around them. His throat ached. Say the words softly. Say them slow. Make them believe you chose this role. "I could stop," Astarion said. Sebastian looked startled. "I didn't say I wanted you to." "No." "Of course you didn't. That was how doors worked. You did not force them. You made people open themselves." Astarion reached across the table and brushed a drop of wine from Sebastian's thumb. Sebastian held very still. Astarion smiled. "Then perhaps I won't." Sebastian crossed the bedroom threshold willingly. That mattered. Astarion did not yet understand why it mattered so much to Cazador, only that it did. Thresholds, invitations. Consent bent into something legal and obscene. The palace had rules older than law, and Cazador enjoyed making him obey all of them. "Are you sure this is all right?" Sebastian whispered. The room was too beautiful for what it was. Heavy curtains, a carved bed, silver candlesticks, velvet dark enough to drink the candlelight. A room arranged to look like indulgence, not a trap. Astarion wanted to say no. The word rose in him, bright and desperate. No. Run. I am sorry. I am so sorry. Get out now. The command sealed his throat. Instead, he smiled. Of course. Sebastian looked around, nervous and dazzled. This is your room? Astarion almost laughed. No, he said. Too honest. Sebastian turned back to him. Astarion covered it quickly, stepping closer, fingers brushing Sebastian's sleeve. It belongs to someone dreadfully wealthy and dreadfully fond of dramatic architecture. Oh, Sebastian smiled, though the unease remained. I'm not sure I belong somewhere like this. Neither am I. The answer slipped out before he could stop it. Sebastian's face softened. That made everything worse. Astarion kissed him before Sebastian could ask another question. Not because he wanted to, not because he did not. That was the cruelty of it. Want had become impossible to trust. His body knew the shape of desire, his mouth knew tenderness, his hands knew where to rest, how to guide, when to pause. Every graceful thing in him had survived only to be put to work. Sebastian kissed him back. Warm. Living. Trusting. Astarion closed his eyes and left himself somewhere else. Afterward, Sebastian slept. Or pretended to. Astarion sat on the edge of the bed, fastening his shirt with fingers that would not shake because he had trained them not to. Sebastian's voice came softly from behind him. Will I see you again? Astarion went still. There were answers that would have been kinder. No. Never. Run while you can. By morning, you will be dead. But Cazador's command still held him, smooth and absolute beneath the skin. Make them believe. Make them stay. Make them easy. Astarion turned back with the smile Cazador had taught him. Perhaps, he said. Sebastian smiled, shy and pleased and doomed. Astarion hated him for believing it, then hated himself so violently there was nothing left for Sebastian at all. A bell cord hung beside the bed. Astarion pulled it once. Somewhere beyond the walls a servant would hear, or Cazador would, or whatever arrangement existed in this house to collect the pretty, warm bodies Astarion left behind. He did not know. He had not asked. That was not entirely true. He had asked once, early on, what happened after. Cazador had looked at him with mild amusement and said, "You are not required for that part." Then he had made sure Astarion understood the mercy of ignorance was not mercy at all. So Astarion stood. Sebastian pushed himself up on one elbow. "You're leaving?" Astarion looked at him, really looked. Brown eyes, nervous hands, a life that had wandered into his path because loneliness had made a door out of him. "Yes," Astarion said. Sebastian's smile faltered. "Oh." Astarion could not comfort him. Comfort would be a lie, and every lie he had left was already being used for murder. So he gave Sebastian the only truth he could manage. "I'm sorry." Sebastian blinked. For what? Astarion opened the door. Behind him, the room was warm. The bed was ruined. Sebastian was alive. For now. "For being exactly what I seemed," Astarion said. Then he stepped into the hall and closed the door before Sebastian could understand. After Sebastian, something in Astarion stopped insisting on its own innocence. Not because he was guilty in any clean, simple way. That would have been easier. Guilt one can hold, name, argue with, confess. This was filthier. He had been compelled. He had been starved. He had been beaten into obedience, commanded through blood, trapped in a body that betrayed him whenever Cazador spoke. And still Sebastian had looked at him, seen him. Why? Astarion had no courtroom for that question, no witness to discredit, no clever ruling, no law. He began to avoid names. Names were doors too, and he could not afford to open them. At first he tried monsters again, violent men, cruel women, predators dressed in silk, men who followed him into alleys with ugly expectations in their eyes. But Cazador did not want justice. He wanted supply. He wanted variety. He wanted the city itself delivered to his table, one trusting pulse at a time. "You choose badly," Cazador said after Astarion brought a mercenary who laughed too loudly and died too bravely. Astarion stood in the study, blood drying on his cuff. "I chose alive." "You were vague." Cazador looked up from his book. Astarion braced. The blow did not come. That was always worse. Cazador closed the book and stood. "You think this is about hunger?" Astarion said nothing. "It is about devotion." Astarion barked a laugh before he could stop himself. Cazador's eyes cooled. "Is something amusing?" "Devotion," Astarion said. "Is that what we're calling it?" "How tasteful." "I must update my vocabulary." Cazador crossed the room. Astarion's body wanted to step back. He did not let it. Cazador touched his face. Velvet hands. Guiding. Possessing. "You will bring me what I desire, not what you decide deserves me." Astarion smiled. "Forgive me, master," he whispered, while thinking. "I keep mistaking you for a plague and assuming everyone deserves better." Cazador's thumb pressed against his lower lip. Astarion went still. "Careful." The word was soft. Astarion had learned to fear softness. Cazador leaned closer. "You are not here to judge anymore." Astarion's smile thinned. "No." "You are not here to choose." "No." "You are not here to be clever." Astarion swallowed. Cazador's hand slid to his throat. "What are you here to be?" The answer waited inside the command. Astarion held it back. 1 second. 2. 3. Pain bloomed. "What are you here to be?" Astarion's voice came out hollow. "Useful." Cazador smiled. "There, you do learn." Years began to pass. Astarion counted them at first, then stopped. Counting made time seem like a hallway with an end. There was no end. Only doors. Open the door. Step inside. Smile. Wait. Do not speak. Do not fight. He became excellent. That was the final insult. Cazador had been right about his gifts. Astarion knew rooms. He knew hunger. He knew wanting. He knew how to find the lonely ones before they recognized loneliness in themselves. He knew how to stand beneath lamplight so people saw an answer to a question they were embarrassed to ask. He knew laughter. He knew where to place his hand. He knew when to bare his throat. He knew how to make surrender look like invitation. Every touch became a command. Every kiss became a debt unpaid. And because he was very good, Cazador rewarded him. A warmer room. A longer leash. A goblet of better blood held close enough to smell before it was taken away. A rat tossed at his feet while the others watched. "Well done," Cazador would say. Astarion learned to hate praise more than punishment. Punishment at least admitted something had gone wrong. Praise meant the machine was working. Sometimes, after bringing someone in, he was allowed to stand in the hall while Cazador fed. Not always. Only when Cazador wanted him to watch. The victims blurred. A woman with green ribbons in her hair. A sailor who called him pretty with a gap-toothed smile. A bored patriarch's son who thought the palace was a delicious scandal. A widower who cried when Astarion touched his hand. One night, Cazador said he was feeling particularly artistic and he needed Astarion's usefulness. Astarion thought he meant his mind, but he had meant his body. Astarion was taken to a room without mirrors and ordered to remove his shirt. He thought, foolishly, that he understood by then what Cazador could do to a body. He had been beaten, starved, displayed, dressed, stripped, commanded, kissed like property, and fed like vermin. But this was different. Cazador did not strike in anger. He worked carefully, almost reverently. A blade at Astarion's back, line by line, curve by curve, cutting words Astarion could not read into skin he could no longer see. "A poem," Cazador said, as if that made it beautiful. Astarion screamed until his voice failed. "Do hold still, little star," Cazador murmured. "Art requires patience." He did not know what was being written into him. That was part of the cruelty. His own back became a locked door. His own skin became a document everyone else could read, except him. Later, when the wounds closed around the script and left the raised scars behind, Cazador made him dress again in silk and velvet and sent him upstairs to smile. No one saw. Or perhaps they did. Perhaps that was worse. Astarion learned then that beauty could be a curtain. People looked at his face, his mouth, his throat, the pretty shape Cazador had polished for use, and never asked what had been carved where he could not reach. His name became dangerous. Not to others. To him. Astarion had once loved the sound of it, Anconine on court lips, your honor in careful voices. Astarion murmured in bed, laughed across tavern tables, shouted by his mother when he was about to do something expensive or illegal. In the palace, his name belonged to Cazador's mouth. "Astarion, come here." Astarion, smile. Astarion, kneel. Astarion, bring me someone pretty. Astarion, do not disappoint me again. Astarion, look at what your mercy has earned them. Little star. That was the worst one. Cazador saved it for particular cruelties. When Astarion fought too openly, when he failed to hide how badly he wanted blood, when he returned with someone kind, when he woke screaming from dreams of being buried, when he stood too long before a covered mirror, forgetting there would be nothing to see. Little star. As if his mother's love had been a ribbon Cazador could tie around his throat and pull. One night, after a century or a minute, time had very little meaning anymore, Cazador summoned him to the ballroom. No guests, no music. Only candles and empty marble. Astarion stood in the center of the floor while Cazador circled him. "You are sulking." "I brewed attractively." The answer came automatically, a ghost of an old joke. Cazador paused. "Do you?" Astarion's stomach dropped. Cazador gestured. A servant removed the cloth from a mirror. Astarion turned his head away. "Look." "No. Look." He looked. The room stared back. Candelabras, marble, Cazador's portrait on the far wall, empty space where Astarion stood. Cazador came up behind him. In the glass there was nothing. "Tell me what you see." Astarion's jaw clenched. "A room." "What else?" "Your appalling taste." Pain flashed. "What else?" Astarion stared at the absence. His absence. No face. No body. No proof. "Nothing," he said. Cazador's hand rested at his throat. "Exactly." Astarion closed his eyes. "Open them." He did. "Beauty without reflection," Cazador murmured. "Desire without self. A door without a room behind it." Astarion's lips parted. He could feel himself slipping, not fainting, not dying, disappearing. It had saved him in the vault. It saved him now. It would save him again and again, until one day he would not know whether there had ever been anything else. Cazador kissed his temple. A father might have. A lover might have. A butcher might have kissed the blade. "You are becoming what I made you." Astarion looked at the mirror, at nothing, and smiled. "Then I hope you kept the receipt." Cazador laughed. Astarion did too. Quietly. Carefully. Because if he could still make a joke, then something had survived. Even if it was only the knife. There were moments of rebellion. Small ones. Pitiful ones. He treasured them because there was nothing else to treasure. He warned a woman once by spilling wine down her dress and making her storm out before he could recover the evening. Cazador locked him in the vault for a year. He chose an old murderer once and brought him proudly to the palace, only to discover Cazador already knew the man and found the selection insulting. 6 months without blood. He told a young poet that Szarr Palace was haunted and laughed so convincingly that the boy thought it a joke, but did not follow him anyway. Godi took his back apart until Astarion could not remember language. After that, rebellions changed shape. He delayed, he distracted. He chose victims who were already close to danger and hated himself for pretending that mattered. He forgot faces deliberately. He remembered names accidentally. He survived. There is no clean way to say what survival made of him. It did not make him noble. It did not make him stronger in the way stories mean when they want pain to be useful. It made him quiet in certain rooms, cruel in others. Beautiful always, because Cazador required beauty and the body obeyed even when the self recoiled. It taught him that shame could become a flaw if one lay on it long enough. It taught him that disgust could be swallowed. It taught him that wanting comfort was dangerous. Wanting freedom was dangerous. Wanting anything was dangerous. It taught him to make his face into an invitation and leave himself elsewhere. It taught him that if he opened the door, someone would step inside. If he bared his throat, someone would call it desire. If he smiled correctly, no one would ask his name. And if they did, he would give it to them like a poisoned cup. Astarion. Pretty, wasn't it? Beautiful name. Beautiful trap. On the night before the nautiloid, Astarion brought no one home. He had not meant to rebel. That was important. He did not stride into the night with freedom burning in his chest and decide no more. He did not have a speech prepared. He did not look toward the palace and swear upon the gods, his mother, or his own long-buried grave that this was the end. He was tired. That was all. 200 years of tired. Tired in the bones that healed, tired in the skin that did not age, tired in the mouth that smiled, tired in a body used so often against his will that tenderness had become another language of fear, tired in the hunger that never became full enough to rest. The city was loud that night. Too loud. Every pulse struck him, every laugh sounded like a debt, every golden lamp looked like mockery. He stood outside a tavern and watched a man reach for him. Handsome, drunk, lonely. Easy. Astarion smiled. The man smiled back. Then somewhere behind him, a woman called, "Mama!" A child ran across the street and threw herself into her mother's arms. The mother laughed and scolded her for muddy shoes. Little star. Astarion turned away. He walked and walked and walked. The command pulled at him as the night deepened. Bring someone. His body ached with it. Bring someone. He passed lovers, drunks, guards. A young clerk with ink on his sleeve. Astarion almost stopped, did stop. The clerk glanced up, startled. Astarion looked at him. For a moment, the city became a courtroom again. A desk, candlelight, a life where ink on a sleeve was merely ink, not blood waiting under skin. The clerk smiled uncertainly. "Can I help you?" Astarion's own smile arrived. Perfect. Warm. Empty. "No," he said, then walked on. Behind him the clerk lived. For that Astarion would pay. He knew it. He kept walking anyway. The alley where it happened was narrow. Of course it was. History had no imagination. He sensed movement above too late. The sky split with wet, organic sound. Tentacles dropped like ropes of muscle. A shadow passed over the roofline, enormous and impossible. Astarion looked up. For one absurd second, he thought Cazador had invented a new punishment. Then something struck the street before him, and everything went black. When he opened his eyes again, a creature unfolded from the dark. Purple-grey flesh, black eyes, a face like a nightmare that had studied anatomy and resented the assignment. Astarion found himself in a strange pod, not able to move. "Well," he said, voice thin, "you're new." Pain exploded behind his eye. Not Cazador's command. Not hunger. Something else. A needle of fire driven through his skull. He screamed. The world tilted. Hands seized him. Not hands. Tentacles, cold and slick around his arms, his throat, his waist. He thrashed, fangs bared, every instinct shrieking. The creature leaned close. Astarion saw his own terror reflected in its black eyes. Then the tadpole entered. There were no words for that, only violation so complete it became white noise. Astarion's body arched, his mind opened like a door forced off its hinges. For an instant he felt Cazador. Not present. Worse. Absent. The command that had lived in his blood for 2 centuries faltered. Astarion hit the ground of his own mind and found no leash there. The shock was so vast that he stopped struggling. For the first time in 200 years, Cazador had told him to bring someone home. And Astarion could not obey. He should have been terrified. He was terrified, but underneath the terror, beneath the pain, beneath the alien thing burrowing into him, and the impossible ship above, and the city falling away, there was relief. Small. Horrible. Holy. The door closed before he turned. He lived. And for once, no one followed him home.
Took out my throat, marble under my feet. He taught me how to smile when I wasn't allowed to speak. He said stand still, like beauty was a prayer. Said they'll come if I pretend I care. I learned the cost of breathing, measured in their eyes. I learned how not to flinch when he stood behind. If I open the door, will you step inside? If I bare my throat, will you call it mine? I am what he made when I learned to obey. Every touch a command, every kiss a debt unpaid. Velvet hands, guiding mine, showed me where to stand, taught me how to shine. Blood on my lips, not hunger, transaction. He called it devotion, I called it distraction. Say the words softly, say them slow, make them believe you chose this road. A command, every kiss a debt unpaid. I survive by disappearing first. If I open the door, don't ask my name. If I bear my throne, don't call it fate. I am still here because I stay beautiful, breathing and quiet, erased. The door closes before I turn. I live so others never learn.